Commander Jake Morrison walked through the massive halls of Unity Prime, the biggest space station he had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that changed colors as he moved past them. Strange creatures floated by in the air, while others crawled on multiple legs across the floor. This was his first time at the Galactic Assembly, and everything looked different from what he knew back on Earth. Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Barnes walked beside him, her eyes moving quickly as she watched all the alien beings around them. She had been studying these species for months, learning their ways and their languages. Behind them came Ryan Carter, a weapons expert who kept his hand near his sidearm even though weapons were not allowed in the assembly halls. Amy Rodriguez carried their communication equipment, ready to send messages back to Earth Command if needed. The assembly hall was huge, with floating platforms for each species. The humans had been given a small platform near the back, which Morrison thought was meant to show them they were not important here. He did not care about that. He was here to do his job and protect human interests in space. A tall crystal being floated over to their platform. Its voice sounded like music when it spoke. "Greetings, humans. I am Xylith of the Zetlithans. We have heard much about your species and your violent ways. Perhaps you will learn peaceful methods from us during your time here." Morrison nodded politely, but said nothing. He had read the files about Zetlithans. They had not fought a war in over 500 years, and thought all problems could be solved by talking. Lisa Barnes stepped forward and answered in their language, which made the crystal being seem surprised. "Your language skills are good for such a young species," Xylith said. "But we hope you can also learn our peaceful ways." Before Morrison could respond, a group of blue water creatures approached their platform. These were Morvani, and they moved. In bubble suits filled with their home water, their leader spoke through a translator device. "Humans interest us greatly. Your history shows much conflict and war. How do you live with such violence in your past?" the Morvani asked. Ryan Carter moved closer to Morrison and whispered, "Sir, they all seem to think we are some kind of dangerous animals." Morrison kept his face calm. "Let them think what they want, Carter. We are here to learn about them too." The assembly began with a loud sound that hurt human ears but seemed normal to everyone else. A floating robot announced the first issue of the day. The Draknari Empire and the Eldorian Federation have a dispute over mining rights in the Sigma Quadrant. Representatives from both sides will present their cases. Morrison watched as small, peaceful-looking beings floated to the center of the hall. These were Eldorians, and they looked like they had never hurt anyone in their lives. Their leader spoke in a soft voice about their need for certain crystals to power their home world. Then the hall grew quiet as heavy. Footsteps echoed through the space. Morrison felt his soldiers tense up as massive reptilian creatures entered the hall. These were Draknari standing 8 feet tall, with thick armor-like skin and sharp teeth. Their leader wore metal plates, covered in what looked like battle scars. The Draknari leader spoke in a deep, rough voice that needed no translator. "I am War Chief Dekmer. The Eldorians are weak and do not deserve the Sigma Quadrant. The strong take what they need. The weak give way or die. This is the way of nature." Morrison had seen this before. He knew the signs of a predator species that only understood force. He watched as the other alien species shifted uncomfortably on their platforms. None of them seemed to know how to deal with such direct threats. The Eldorian leader tried to speak again about sharing resources and peaceful solutions. Vekmar laughed, a sound that made everyone in the hall nervous. "You speak of peace while sitting on resources that could feed my people. We will take what we need. Your choice is to give it freely or lose it in battle." The assembly erupted in confused chatter. Dozens of different alien voices filled the air as species tried to understand what was happening. Morrison noticed that most of them seemed shocked by Vekmar's direct approach. A robot voice called for order. "The assembly will now vote on proposed solutions to this dispute. First proposal is increased trade negotiations between the two parties. Morrison watched as the vote counters showed hundreds of votes in favor. Only the humans and the Draconary voted against it. Vecmer stepped forward again. We do not want trade. We want territory. Your talking means nothing to us. The second proposal was for cultural exchange programs. Again, hundreds of votes in favor, with only humans and Draconary against. Lisa Barnes leaned over to Morrison. Sir, they do not understand what they are dealing with. This Vecmer is not interested in any peaceful solutions. Morrison nodded. He had spent his whole life studying warfare and military tactics. He could see what was coming, but none of these peaceful species seemed to recognize the warning signs. The third proposal was for meditation, retreats to help both sides understand each other better. The vote was the same as before. Vecmer made a sound that might have been laughter. Commander Morrison, came a voice from the assembly leader, a strange creature that looked like a floating jellyfish. Your species has experience with conflicts. What do you suggest? Morrison stood up slowly. The entire hall became quiet, waiting to hear what the human would say. He looked around at all the different species, then at the Draconary war chief, who was watching him with interest. In my experience, Morrison said clearly, some problems cannot be solved with words alone. If someone wants to take something by force, they will not be stopped by talking, or meditation, or trade offers. They will only be stopped by a stronger force pointing in the opposite direction. The hall exploded in shocked voices. Many alien species seemed upset by his words. The Zelthan who had spoken to them earlier floated over quickly. Violence is never the answer, human. Surely you do not suggest warfare in this enlightened age. Morrison looked directly at War Chief Vecmer, who was now grinning at him with sharp teeth showing. I suggest preparation, hope for peace, but prepare for war. Because right now, looking at this situation, I see war coming whether you prepare for it or not. The assembly ended that day with no solution reached. As the different species left their platforms, Morrison gathered his team together. What do you think, sir? Ryan Carter asked. Morrison watched as Vecmer left the hall, surrounded by other Draconary warriors. I think we need to send a message to Earth Command. Something bad is coming, and these peaceful species are not ready for it. 3 months had passed since the first assembly meeting, and Jake Morrison was getting more worried each day. The alien species kept trying to solve the Draconary problem with gifts and meetings, while the reptilian warriors grew stronger and more aggressive. Lisa Barnes came into their small quarters on Unity Prime with a datapad in her hands. Her face showed the stress she had been feeling lately. Jake, you need to see this intelligence report. The Draconary have been busy while everyone else has been talking. Morrison took the pad and read through the information. His expression grew darker with each line. 15 new dreadnought ships in the last month alone. Training camps on 7 different worlds. Weapons manufacturing at levels we have never seen before. It gets worse, Lisa said, sitting down heavily in her chair. Ryan intercepted some of their communications. They are not just preparing to take the Sigma Quadrant. They are planning to expand across the entire galactic arm. Amy Rodriguez entered their quarters carrying communication equipment. She had been working non-stop to keep contact with human colonies and Earth Command. I just finished talking to Admiral Sullivan back on Earth. She wants to know if the Assembly is ready to authorize defensive preparations yet. Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Assembly just voted to send the Dragonaria collection of rare flowers as a peace offering. They think Vecmer will be impressed by their beauty and change his mind about conquest. Flowers, Ryan Carter said as he joined them in the small room. Sir, I have been watching Draconary military exercises through our long-range sensors. These are not beings who care about flowers. They care about strength, territory, and dominance. Every day they get stronger, while our allies get weaker through In action, Lisa pulled up holographic displays, showing Draknari movements across space. Red dots marked their military positions, and the pattern was clear to anyone who understood warfare. Look at this formation. They are surrounding the Eldorian Federation from 3 sides. Classic pincer movement. In 2 more months, they will be ready to attack from all directions at once. Morrison studied the display carefully. He had seen similar patterns during human conflicts on Earth and Mars. How long do we have before they move? Based on their supply movements and troop rotations, I estimate 6 weeks until they begin their assault, Lisa answered. The Eldorians have no idea what is coming. They keep sending diplomatic messages asking for more talks. Amy activated her communication array and connected to the human colony on Kepler Station. Commander Morrison, this is Colony Administrator Dan Phillips. We have been monitoring Draknari scout ships near our system. They seem to be mapping our defenses. What should we do? Morrison thought quickly. The assembly had made it clear that humans were not allowed to take military action without their approval. But he also had a duty to protect human lives. Dan, you need to quietly prepare your people for possible evacuation. Do not make any aggressive moves, but be ready to leave quickly if needed. Understood, sir. We will prepare quietly. The communication ended, and Morrison turned to his team. We need to try one more time to make the assembly understand what is happening. Maybe if we show them the intelligence data, they will finally authorize defensive preparations. 2 hours later, Morrison stood before the full assembly again. Representatives from dozens of species filled their floating platforms, chattering in languages that sounded like music, buzzing insects, and whale songs. The human platform was still in the back, still treated as unimportant. Honored delegates, Morrison began. I need to share important information about Draknari military activities. The jellyfish-like assembly leader acknowledged him with a gesture. Proceed, Commander Morrison, but please remember that this assembly promotes peaceful solutions to all conflicts. Morrison activated holographic displays, showing Draknari ship movements, weapons, production, and military exercises. The data was clear and undeniable. In the past 3 months, while this assembly has been proposing peaceful solutions, the Draknari Empire has built enough warships to destroy entire star systems. They have trained armies that could conquer dozens of worlds. This is not the behavior of a species interested in negotiation. A Zelthan representative floated forward, its crystal body glowing with what Morrison had learned was agitation. Commander Morrison, surely you are not suggesting that we should respond to military buildup with our own military preparations. That would create an arms race that could lead to actual conflict. The conflict is already coming, Morrison said firmly. The question is whether you want to be ready for it or not. An insectoid Cathara clicked its mandibles together in what passed for laughter among their species. Humans always see war everywhere they look. Perhaps this is because violence is all they understand. The Draknari are simply protecting their interests. Morrison felt his patience running out. Protecting their interests by surrounding the Eldorian Federation with battle fleets. By training assault troops and building invasion ships. This is not defensive behavior. War Chief Thekmer had been quiet during the discussion, but now he stood up on his platform. The massive Draknari looked even more intimidating than before, with new scars across his armor-like skin. The human speaks truth about our preparations. We prepare for war because war is coming. The weak species of this galaxy have grown soft and useless. They will learn to be strong, or they will be removed. The assembly hall erupted in shocked voices. Many species had never heard such direct threats before. The peaceful Eldorians seemed especially frightened by Vekmer's words. The assembly leader tried to restore order. War Chief Vekmer, surely you do not mean actual warfare. Perhaps we could arrange more cultural exchanges or trade agreements. Vekmer bared his sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. I mean exactly what I say. In 4 weeks, Eldorian territory will belong to the Dragneri Empire. Any who resist will be destroyed. Any who surrender will be allowed to serve us. This is our final offer. Morrison watched as the alien delegates looked at each other in confusion and fear. They had spent so long living in peace that they had forgotten how to recognize real danger when it stood before them making direct threats. I call for an immediate vote on authorizing defensive military preparations, Morrison announced loudly. The vote was swift and decisive. 847 species voted against military action. Only humans voted in favor. The Assembly believed that more diplomacy would solve the problem. After the session ended, Morrison gathered with his team in their quarters. Lisa looked exhausted from monitoring Dragneri activities. Ryan was angry about the Assembly's refusal to prepare for obvious danger. Amy was worried about the human colonies that would be caught in the fighting. For weeks, Lisa said quietly. Vecmer gave them 4 weeks, but my analysis says they will attack sooner than that, probably in 10 days. Morrison made his decision. Amy, send a coded message to Earth Command. Tell Admiral Sullivan that we need emergency authorization for Operation Garden Shield. Sir, that is the plan for protecting human colonies without Assembly approval. Are you sure? Amy asked. Morrison looked at the intelligence displays, showing Dragneri fleets moving into attack positions. Peaceful alien species were about to learn the hard way that some problems could not be solved with flowers and cultural exchanges. Send the message, he said. If the Assembly will not protect innocent lives, then humanity will do it alone. We trained for war, so others would not have to, but it looks like we will need those skills very soon. The attack came earlier than even Lisa Barnes had predicted. Jake Morrison was awakened by emergency alarms, screaming through Unity Prime at what humans would call 3 in the morning. Amy Rodriguez was already at her communication station, her face pale as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Commander, the Dragneri have begun their assault, Amy said, her voice shaking. 17 Eldorian colonies are under attack. Their defenses are falling faster than anyone thought possible. Morrison quickly dressed and joined his team in their command center. Ryan Carter was monitoring military frequencies, while Lisa analyzed the attack patterns on her tactical displays. The holographic maps showed red Dragneri fleets surrounding blue Eldorian positions, like wolves circling sheep. How bad is it? Morrison asked, though he could already see the answer in the grim faces around him. Lisa pointed to the tactical display. Eldorian Prime fell in 6 hours. 6 hours, Jake. They had orbital defense stations, energy shields, and quantum detection arrays. The Dragneri just smashed through everything like it was made of paper. The communication array crackled with desperate messages from fleeing Eldorians. Their voices were high and musical, but now filled with terror and confusion. Amy translated the messages as they came in. This is Science Station Gamma 7. Dragneri ships are firing on our research facility. We are not a military target. We study plants and soil. Why are they attacking us? The message ended in static. Another voice came through the speakers. Emergency transmission from Colony New Hope. Dragneri ground troops have landed. They are not taking prisoners. Repeat, they are not taking prisoners. Anyone who can hear this message, do not try to negotiate with them. Run. Just run. Morrison watched the tactical display as more blue dots disappeared. Each dot represented thousands or millions of Eldorian lives. The peaceful species had built their entire civilization around the idea that all intelligent beings could be reasoned with. They were learning the terrible truth that some beings only understood violence. Ryan looked up from his monitoring station. Sir, the other species are starting to panic. The Zelathans are trying to create energy barriers around threatened worlds, but the Dragneri are breaking through them with some kind of resonance weapons. What about the Morvani? Morrison asked. They sent their bioships to try to disrupt Dragneri communications, Lisa answered. The Dragneri destroyed them with military-grade plasma cannons. Those bioships were not designed for combat. They were basically swimming in space with communication equipment attached. Amy received another transmission, this one from Human Colony Administrator Dan Phillips on Kepler Station. Commander Morrison, we can see Dragneri scout ships at the edge of our system. They are scanning our defenses, but they have not attacked yet. What are your orders? Morrison thought quickly. Earth Command had not yet responded to his request for Operation Garden Shield authorization. The human colonies were vulnerable, and the Assembly was still holding emergency meetings instead of taking action. Dan, evacuate all non-essential personnel to the inner system defense platforms. Prepare for siege conditions, but do not fire, unless fired upon. We are still technically under Assembly authority. Understood, sir. But Commander, these Dragneri do not look like they plan to talk first and fight later. The communication ended, and Morrison turned to his team. Lisa, what is your assessment of Dragneri military capabilities based on their attack patterns? Lisa brought up detailed analysis charts. They are using classic overwhelming force tactics. Massive ships, heavy weapons, direct assault on all defensive positions simultaneously. But Jake, they are not just trying to conquer territory. They are trying to completely destroy Eldorian civilization. This is not conquest. This is extermination. As if to prove her point, a new transmission came from the Eldorian homeworld itself. The voice belonged to Elder Moralith, the leader who had spoken so hopefully about peaceful solutions just days before. This is Elder Moralith, calling any Assembly forces. Our homeworld is under siege. Dragneri ships are bombarding our cities from orbit. We have offered to surrender and give them anything they want, but they continue to attack civilian targets. Please, someone help us. Our children are dying. The transmission was cut short by the sound of explosions in the background. Morrison slammed his fist on the table. Where is the Assembly response? Where are the emergency defense fleets they promised to organize? Amy checked her communication logs. The Assembly is still in session, debating the legal authority to use military force without unanimous consent. The Cathara delegation is arguing that the Dragneri attacks might be justified if the Eldorians somehow provoked them. Provoked them how? Ryan demanded angrily. By existing, apparently, Amy said with disgust. The next several hours brought increasingly desperate reports from across the galaxy. Eldorian worlds fell one by one as their peaceful defensive systems proved useless against military assault. The few Eldorian ships that tried to fight back were destroyed so quickly that they barely slowed down the Dragneri advance. Lisa updated her tactical displays every few minutes, each update showing more red and less blue. At this rate, the entire Eldorian Federation will be destroyed within 2 weeks. And Jake, the Dragneri are not stopping there. Intelligence reports show them moving additional fleets toward south in space. The Crystal People are next, Morrison asked. It looks that way, and after them, probably the Morvani systems. The Dragneri seem to be targeting the most peaceful species first, the ones least able to fight back. Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Amy, send an emergency transmission to Earth Command on all available channels. Tell Admiral Sullivan that I am requesting immediate deployment of all available human forces under Emergency Colonial Defense Protocol 7. Amy looked surprised. Sir, that protocol allows human forces to act independently of Assembly authority in cases of imminent threat to human lives. Are you sure you want to invoke it? Morrison looked at the tactical display, showing the systematic destruction of peaceful civilizations, while their allies debated legal procedures. Our colonies are next on the Dragneri target list. We cannot wait for the Assembly to decide that self-defense is legally acceptable. Within hours, Admiral Kate Sullivan responded personally. Commander Morrison, Earth Command authorizes Operation Crimson Shield. Admiral Ben Torres is already en route with the 3rd Battle Group. Colonel Sarah Mitchell is mobilizing ground forces. We are coming, Jake. Hold your positions. As Morrison prepared for humanity's entry into the Galactic War, he received one last transmission from Elder Mirlith. The Eldorian leader's voice was weak and filled with sadness. Commander Morrison, I wanted to thank you for trying to warn us. We thought that intelligence and reason could solve any problem. We were wrong. If any Eldorians survive this war, we will remember that humans tried to help us when others would not. Please do not let our children die for our mistakes. Morrison responded immediately. Elder Moralith, human forces are on their way. We will do everything we can to stop this genocide. But even as he spoke, Morrison wondered if humanity would be strong enough to stand against an enemy that had crushed entire civilizations in a matter of days. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when trained human warriors faced an enemy that only understood strength. Admiral Ben Torres stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UES Defiance, watching the tactical displays show Draknari forces destroying another Eldorian colony. His battle group had been traveling at maximum speed for 3 days, and they were finally approaching the war zone. Admiral, we are receiving distress calls from 7 different Eldorian systems, reported Communications Officer Jenny Walsh. They are asking for immediate assistance. Torres studied the tactical situation. The Draknari had spread their forces across multiple systems, believing that no one could challenge their overwhelming firepower. They were about to learn that humans fought differently than the peaceful species they had been destroying. Captain Kim, take your destroyer squadron to the Kepler defense line. Set up overlapping fields of fire, and prepare for hit-and-run tactics. Captain Mitchell, your cruisers will support the evacuation of Eldorian civilians from Colony 7. I will take the main force to engage their command ships at Sigma Prime. The human officers acknowledged their orders and began moving their ships into position. Torres had spent years studying Draknari military tactics, and he knew their weakness. They relied on massive ships and overwhelming firepower, but they had no experience fighting enemies who used speed and coordination instead of brute strength. Meanwhile, on the surface of contested worlds, Colonel Sarah Mitchell was leading human ground forces in a completely different kind of warfare. Her Marines had studied the Draknari invasion patterns and identified their key weakness. They expected enemies to meet them head-on in direct combat. Listen up, Marines, Mitchell called to her troops as they prepared for deployment. These reptilian monsters are bigger than us, stronger than us, and their natural armor can stop small arms fire. But they think like predators, not like soldiers. They expect prey to run or stand and fight. We are going to do neither. Sergeant Tony Martinez raised his hand. What is the plan, Colonel? Mitchell pointed to a holographic map of the target city. We hit their supply lines, their communication centers, and their command posts. We do not try to fight their warriors directly. We make them chase us through terrain that favors speed over strength. We turn every building into a fortress and every street into a killing zone. The first major engagement occurred at the Kepler defense line, where Captain Danny Kim commanded a mixed squadron of human destroyers. The Draknari attack force approached with their standard tactics, massive dreadnoughts leading the assault, expecting enemy forces to meet them in a direct battle. Instead, the human ships scattered as soon as the Draknari fleet came within range. The reptilian commanders were confused when their targets seemed to run away before the fighting even began. Admiral Vetchver, the human ships are retreating, reported a Draknari tactical officer. Pursue them and destroy them, Vetchver ordered. Show these mammals what happens when they challenge the Draknari Empire. But as the Draknari dreadnoughts chased the human destroyers, they found themselves flying into a carefully prepared trap. Captain Kim had positioned his ships behind asteroids and debris fields, creating crossfire zones that turned the Draknari strength into a disadvantage. All ships, execute fire pattern Alpha, Kim ordered. The The human destroyers emerged from hiding, simultaneously launching coordinated missile strikes against the Draknari engines and weapon systems. Instead of trying to destroy the massive enemy ships directly, they targeted critical systems that would disable them. The Draknari found themselves under attack from multiple directions at once, their heavy armor useless against precision strikes on vulnerable components. For the first time in their military history, they were outmaneuvered by smaller, faster opponents. "This is impossible," Vekvar roared as his flagship lost power to its main weapons. "How can such small ships damage our dreadnoughts?" Captain Kim answered over the communication channel, "Because we know where to hit you, and you do not know where we will strike next." The battle continued for 6 hours, with human ships appearing and disappearing like ghosts, while Draknari forces struggled to adapt to tactics they had never encountered. By the end of the engagement, 3 Draknari dreadnoughts were disabled and drifting in space, while the human squadron had lost only 2 destroyers. On the ground, Colonel Mitchell's Marines were teaching the Draknari that urban warfare was very different from the open battles they preferred. The reptilian warriors were used to charging directly at their enemies, using their size and strength to overwhelm resistance. Instead, they found themselves under attack from directions they could not predict. Human Marines used building ventilation systems to move unseen through cities. They planted explosives in locations that would collapse structures onto advancing Draknari forces. They used sniper tactics to eliminate enemy commanders from long range. "Where are they?" demanded Draknari Ground Commander Sektar, as another of his squads was eliminated by invisible enemies. "These humans fight like cowards, hiding instead of facing us directly." Sergeant Martinez heard this transmission and responded over captured Draknari communication equipment. "We fight like soldiers, you overgrown lizard. There is a difference between bravery and stupidity." The comment enraged Sektar, who ordered his forces to hunt down the humans, regardless of casualties. This was exactly what Mitchell had hoped would happen. Angry enemies made mistakes, and mistakes could be exploited. As Draknari forces spread out to search buildings and tunnels, they became vulnerable to the small unit tactics that human Marines had perfected over centuries of warfare. Individual Draknari warriors were powerful, but separated from their units. They could be overwhelmed by coordinated human teams using superior tactics and knowledge of the terrain. Admiral Torres received reports from across the battle zone as human forces engaged Draknari fleets and ground armies. The news was better than he had dared to hope. Admiral Captain Kim reports successful defense of the Kepler line with minimal casualties. Jenny Walsh announced, "Colonel Mitchell's ground forces have retaken 3 major cities on Colony 7. The Draknari forces are requesting reinforcements from their reserve fleets." Torres smiled grimly. The Draknari were learning what Earth's enemies had discovered. Throughout human history, that technological superiority meant nothing against superior tactics and the will to fight for something greater than conquest. "Send a message to all human forces," Torres ordered. "Phase 1 of Operation Crimson Shield is complete. Begin Phase 2. It is time to show these reptilian bullies what happens when they threaten innocent civilians." Across the galaxy, human ships and soldiers began their counterattack against an enemy that had never faced organized military resistance. The Draknari had crushed peaceful species through overwhelming force, but now they faced warriors who had been training for exactly this kind of fight since they first learned to make tools and organize armies. War Chief Dekmer received the reports from his defeated commanders with growing anger and confusion. How could the small human force be stopping his mighty empire? How could creatures so much smaller and weaker than Draknari warriors be winning battles against superior numbers? He was about to learn that in warfare, victory did not always belong to the strongest. Sometimes it belonged to those who fought smarter, harder, and with better reasons than simple conquest. The humans were fighting to protect innocent lives, and that gave them a strength that the Draknari could not understand or overcome. War Chief Dekmar stood in the command center of his massive super dreadnought, the Crimson Fang, watching his empire's greatest fleet prepare for one final assault. The humans had somehow stopped his forces across multiple systems, using tactics that his warriors could not understand or counter. Now he would personally lead the attack that would crush these small mammals and restore Draknari dominance to the galaxy. War Chief, our scouts report that the human fleet is gathering at Forge Prime, announced Subcommander Vector. They have brought ships from across their territory, but they are still outnumbered 3-1. Dekmar bared his sharp teeth in satisfaction. Good. They choose to make their final stand where we can destroy them all at once. Signal the fleet. We advance to Forge Prime and end this war today. Meanwhile, Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Liberty, coordinating the largest human military operation since the colonies were first established. Ships from every human world had answered the call, bringing together a fleet that represented humanity's entire military capability. Admiral, we have confirmation that the Draknari main fleet is approaching, reported Captain Helen Carter from her cruiser squadron. Intelligence estimates over 3,000 enemy ships, including that super dreadnought we have been tracking. Sullivan studied the tactical displays showing the approaching enemy force. The Draknari had committed everything to this battle, believing that overwhelming numbers would guarantee victory. They were about to learn that humans had been outnumbered, before and had survived by fighting smarter, not harder. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan, she announced over the fleet communication network. Today we fight not just for human colonies, but for every peaceful species in the galaxy. The Draknari think that size and strength determine victory. We will show them that courage, skill, and determination are more powerful than any weapon they can build. Commander Jake Morrison listened to the Admiral's speech from his position aboard the UES Defiance, where he had been assigned to coordinate with surviving Eldorian and other alien forces. The peaceful species had finally agreed to contribute what little military capability they possessed. But most of their help came in the form of intelligence and logistical support. Commander Morrison, came a transmission from Elder Merilith, whose people had suffered the worst of the Draknari assault. Our remaining ships cannot fight like yours, but we can provide targeting data for Draknari weak points that our scientists have identified. Every bit of help matters, Elder Merilith, Morrison replied. Your people's sacrifice will not be forgotten. The battle began as the Draknari fleet entered the Forge Prime system with their characteristic arrogance. Dekmar expected the humans to meet him in direct combat, ship against ship, in the traditional way of warfare. Instead, he found empty space where the human fleet should have been. Where are they? Dekmar demanded, as his sensors showed no enemy contacts in the expected battle zone. His answer came in the form of missile strikes from directions that should have been empty. The human fleet had scattered throughout the system, using asteroids, debris fields, and the planet's moons as cover. They attacked in coordinated waves, hitting specific targets before disappearing again into the void. Captain Danny Kim led his destroyer squadron in a daring attack, run against the Draknari command ships. His vessels came in fast and low, using the planet's gravity well to accelerate beyond normal speeds before launching their missiles and diving back toward cover. Target their communication arrays, Kim ordered his pilots. Cut off their ability to coordinate between ships. The human strategy was working perfectly. Instead of engaging in a massive fleet battle where Draknari numbers would be decisive, they were fighting dozens of smaller engagements where superior tactics and coordination could overcome raw firepower. Commodore Helen Carter commanded the cruiser forces that provided covering fire for the hit-and-run attacks. Her ships had been modified with additional missile launchers and electronic warfare equipment, allowing them to disrupt Draknari targeting systems while providing fire support. For the smaller vessels, Admiral, the Draknari are breaking formation, Carter reported. They are trying to chase our destroyers individually, instead of maintaining fleet discipline. Sullivan smiled grimly. Perfect. Signal all units to begin Phase 3 of the battle plan. Phase 3 was the most dangerous part of the human strategy. Instead of continuing the hit-and-run tactics, selected human ships would deliberately allow themselves to be surrounded by Draknari forces, drawing the enemy into prepared kill zones where the full weight of human firepower could be brought to bear. Vice Admiral Chris Johnson volunteered to lead the most dangerous part of the operation. His heavy cruiser squadron would act as bait, appearing to retreat in panic, while actually drawing Draknari forces into a carefully prepared trap. All right, people, Johnson announced to his crews. We are going to make these reptiles think they have us cornered. When they move in for the kill, we spring our surprise. Remember, timing is everything. Johnson's ships began what appeared to be a desperate retreat toward the inner system. The Draknari took the bait immediately, with War Chief Thekmer himself leading the pursuit in his massive super dreadnought. Finally, the mammals show their true nature. Thekmer growled as he watched the human ships flee before his superior firepower. They run like prey animals when faced with real strength. But as the Draknari fleet pursued Johnson's squadron deeper into the system, they found themselves surrounded by asteroids that had been quietly mined with human explosives. When Admiral Sullivan gave the signal, the entire asteroid field erupted in coordinated detonations that trapped the Draknari ships in a maze of debris and fire. Now, Sullivan ordered, all units, execute final strike. The remaining human fleet emerged from hiding all at once, attacking the confused and scattered Draknari forces from every direction simultaneously. Ships that had been playing hit-and-run for hours suddenly revealed their true firepower as they concentrated their attacks on specific enemy vessels. The battle for Thekmer's super dreadnought became personal when Commander Morrison led a boarding action against a massive ship. His team of elite Marines used cutting torches and explosives to breach the hull, fighting their way through corridors designed for beings twice their size. These passages are too big for proper defensive fighting, Sergeant Tony Martinez observed, as they advanced through the enemy ship. The Draknari built this thing for intimidation, not efficiency. Morrison nodded as his team planted charges on critical systems throughout the super dreadnought. Their mistake is our advantage. Keep moving. We need to reach the command center before they can coordinate a counterattack. The corridors of the Draknari flagship echoed with the sound of combat as human Marines fought reptilian warriors in close quarters. The Draknari had advantages in size and strength, but the humans had superior tactics and equipment designed specifically for ship-to-ship fighting. When Morrison finally reached the command center, he found War Chief Thekmer waiting for him with a handful of elite guards. The massive Draknari leader stood nearly 9 feet tall, his natural armor scarred from countless battles. So the little mammals think they can challenge the might of the Draknari Empire, Thekmer said, his voice filled with contempt. I will enjoy killing you personally, human. Morrison checked his weapon and looked at the alien who had ordered the genocide of peaceful species. You made one big mistake, Thekmer. You thought this was about strength. This was never about strength. This was about protecting innocent people from bullies like you. The final confrontation was brutal but brief. Thekmer was powerful and experienced, but Morrison fought with the desperation of someone protecting everything he cared about. When the war chief finally fell, his death marked the end of Draknari expansion and the beginning of their retreat. Outside the super dreadnought, the space battle was turning decisively in humanity's favor. Draknari ships that had seemed invincible were being destroyed or disabled by coordinated human attacks. The Reptilian Empire's military might was crumbling under the assault of warriors who had trained their entire lives for exactly this kind of fight. Admiral Sullivan watched as the last Draknari resistance collapsed. Enemy ships were fleeing the system in disorder, their commanders dead or captured. The galaxy's first major war in centuries was ending with complete human victory. Admiral, "We are receiving surrender requests from the remaining Draknari forces," reported Communications Officer Walsh. "They are requesting terms for withdrawal to their home territories." Sullivan considered the request carefully. Humanity had proven its point, but continuing the war would only create more suffering. Grant them safe passage back to Draknari space, but make it clear that any future aggression against peaceful species will be met with immediate and overwhelming human response. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy's surviving species gathered once again at Unity Prime, but this time, the human delegation was not seated in the back of the assembly hall. Commander Morrison stood at the center of the chamber, addressing representatives who no longer saw humans as primitive warmongers. "We trained for war so you would not have to," Morrison told the assembled delegates. "But when diplomacy failed, and innocent lives were threatened, we did what had to be done." The battlefield turned red with the blood of aggressors, who learned too late that peace is only possible when good people are prepared to fight for it. Elder Moralith, speaking for the Eldorian survivors, addressed the assembly with words that would become famous throughout the galaxy. "The humans saved us when we could not save ourselves. They fought when we could only talk. They bled so that others could live in peace. We will never forget this debt." The assembly voted unanimously to establish the Galactic Defense Corps under human leadership. Species that had never considered military preparation began training their people in defensive tactics. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the only answer to violence was superior violence applied with precision and purpose. As Morrison looked out at the diverse species that now worked together for mutual protection, he felt satisfied that humanity had proved its worth, not through conquest, but through the defense of those who could not defend themselves. The humans had turned the battlefield red, but they had also ensured that such battles might never be necessary again.